Hi guys, I am Mrs. Washington and I am here with your teacher, Mr. Port. Today we are going to be going over, what are we going to be going over?
The executive branch.
In the presidency. To start it off, we are going to be watching a little video called Animaniacs Presidents. Enjoy!
Hi-ho, do you know the names of the U.S. residents who then became the presidents and got a view from the White House through a Pennsylvania Avenue? George Washington was the first you see. He once chopped down a cherry tree. President number 2 would be John Adams, and then number 3. Now Jefferson stayed up to write a declaration late at night, so he and his wife had a great big fight, and she made him sleep on the couch all night. James Madison never had a son, and he fought the War of 1812. James Monroe's colossal nose was bigger than Pinocchio. John Quincy Adams was number 6, and it's Andrew Jackson's butt he kicks, so Jackson learns to play politics. Next time he's the one that the country picks. Martin Van Buren, number 8 for a one-term shot as chief of state. William Harrison, how do you praise? That guy was dead in 30 days. John Tyler, he liked country folk. And after him came President Polk. Zachary Taylor liked to smoke. His breath killed friends whenever he spoke. 1850, really nifty, Miller Fillmore's in. Young and fierce was Franklin Pierce, the man without a chin. Follows next up, period spanning 4 long years with James Buchanan. Then the South starts shooting cannon, and we got a civil war. A war down south of Dixie. Up to that comes old Abe Lincoln, there's the guy who's really thinking. Kept the United States from shrinking, saved the ship of state from sinking. Andrew Johnson's next. He had some slight defects. Congress each would impeach, and so the country now elects Ulysses Simpson Grant, who would screen and rave and rant. While drinking whiskey, oh the risky, cause he spilled on his pants. It's 1877 and the Democrats would gloat, but they're all amazed when Rutherford Hayes wins by just 1 vote. James Garfield someone really hated cause he was assassinated. Chester Arthur gets instated, 4 years later he was traded. Lord Grover Cleveland really sat elected twice as a Democrat. Then Benjamin Harrison after that. It's William McKinley at the back. Teddy Roosevelt charged up San Juan Hill. And President Taft, he got the bill. In 1913, Woodrow Wilson takes us into World War I. Warren Harding next in line. Calvin Coolidge, he does fine. And then in 1929, the market crashes and we buy. It's Herbert Hoover's big debut. He gets the blame and loses too. Franklin Roosevelt, president who helped us win in World War II. Harry Truman, weird little human, serves 2 terms and when he's done. It's Eisenhower who's got the power from 53 to 61. John Kennedy had Camelot, then Lyndon Johnson took his spot. Richard Nixon, he gets caught, and Gerald Ford fell down a lot. Jimmy Carter liked campaign trips, and Ronald Reagan's speeches scripts all came from famous movie clips, and President Bush said, read my lips. Now in Washington, D.C., there's Democrats in the GOP, but the ones in charge are plain to see. The Clintons, Bill and Hillary. The next president to lead the way, well, it just might be yourself one day. Then the press will distort everything you say. So jump in your brain and fly away.
All right, that is the Animaniacs. That's what I got to grow up watching. Obviously, that ended with President Clinton. We've had a few presidents since then, including the second Bush. We had President Obama, and obviously now President Trump. So maybe the Animaniacs will come back someday and update their video for us. What do you think of that, Mrs. Washington? Did you like that video?
I did.
Awesome. All right. Yep, starting it again. Let's move on to the next slide. All right, so we want to go over the qualifications and how the executive branch is formed and made up for the branch of the legislative branch. So qualifications, how old do you have to be president, Ms. Washington?
Well, I think I can be 35 years old.
That is correct, all right. So these are just some of those base numbers we need to remember. So you have to be 35 years old. When we ask what kind of citizen must you be, you got to make sure you have this correct. It's a natural born citizen. All right, so when we went over citizenship, we talked about a naturalized citizen. That is someone who has all the same rights as any other citizen in the United States. You can run for office. You can be a senator, a governor. You have all the same rights. but you can't run for president. All right. So naturalized citizen is someone who was born in another country, moved to the United States, and went through the naturalization process to become a U.S. citizen. So you must be a natural born citizen in order to run for the presidency. And how long must you live in the U.S. for? It is 14 years. All right, so that means you have to be a resident of the United States. If you're born and raised in the United States and you go and live in another country, whether it's for work or whatever, you become a resident of another country, that's fine. You're still a natural born citizen. But if you come back to the U.S., you have to be a resident of the United States again for 14 years to qualify to run for president. Okay, so you see some of the pictures here on the side. These are two of the youngest and the oldest candidates we've ever had for the presidency. All right, so William Jennings Bryan ran for the presidency in the early 1900s. He was 36 years old. He was a little younger than Mayor Pete, who obviously was just trying to run for the presidency. He was 38 years old. And then our oldest candidate, which we're going to assume he's going to be the next candidate because we just saw this week that Bernie Sanders dropped out of the election. So without anything else major happening, he will be the Democrat nominee and the presidential candidate. So he will be officially the oldest candidate to run for the presidency at 77. It's a big wide range of ages there. All right, so presidential terms. All right, so when you are elected to the United States presidency, how many years do you serve for, Cam? Or Mrs. Washington, I'm sorry.
I think 4 years.
It is 4 years. Nice job. So you get to serve for 4 years, and that is one term, all right? 2 terms is the number of terms that you're allowed to serve. So a lot of students get that one messed up because you got to read the question carefully, all right? How many terms and how long is a term are 2 completely different answers, right? So you can serve for 2 terms, 4 years each. This became the actual law of the land under a constitutional amendment under the 22nd Amendment in 1951. Shortly after the second picture here, the lower picture, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, President FDR, was elected to 4 terms of the office. All right, so it was during the Great Depression. It was during World War II. He ended up serving, being elected to 4. He died in office of his during the 4th term. He died in office. Now George Washington could have been reelected to multiple terms. He probably could have been reelected 3, 4, 5 times if he lived long enough. However, he stepped away after 2 terms because he wanted to set the standard. He believed that he didn't want the presidency to turn into being like a king or some type of dictatorship. So after serving 2 terms, 8 years, he walked away, basically trying to say, hey, I want to set the standard. This is what I think should happen if you are fortunate enough to be elected twice. All right. FDR obviously was a time of war with the Great Depression just ending. So the people really didn't care about it at that time to reelect someone to multiple terms over 2. But they eventually decided to create an amendment in 1951 so that never again can a president serve more than 2 terms. So 8 years is the max. All right, so what caused the need? Just went over that. It was FDR being elected to 4 terms of office. All right, so the Electoral College is how we determine our presidents of the United States. So we went over this with our project when we covered the election process. And just kind of quick refresh here, you have to have 270 electoral votes. I told you guys to kind of imagine each state is worth so many points. So if you look at the electoral maps here, each state is worth so many points. So Illinois is worth 20, Florida's worth 29, you got California worth 55. So you have to win the majority votes in individual states. And then as you win those majority votes in each state, you start collecting the electoral votes or the points that that state is worth. All right, so I use these 2 maps to show the difference of when a Democrat won in 2008 compared to when a Republican won in 2016. So when President Obama won the election, you can see a lot of these states were blue in here because that's representing the Democrats. So big states like Florida, you got Michigan, Wisconsin, you got Iowa, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania. Those were some states that voted for a Democrat in the 2008 election. But then when you look at the 2016 election, those states, Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Florida, all voted for President Trump in the 2016 election. So this is ultimately what we talked about calling those the swing states. Those are the states that some years they go Democrat, some years they go Republican. So those are the states that you're going to see the most campaigning taking place in. But at the end of the day, you have to win at least 270 electoral votes, which you can see Trump won 306 in 2016, and President Obama won 365 in 2008. All right, so what makes up the executive branch itself? So we know the president's part of it, but also part of the executive branch would be the vice president, who's currently Mike Pence. And then the big part of the executive branch are all the people that are going to help the president along the way. So we call this the executive office of the president. So these would be the president's advisors, such as the chief of staff, who's basically going to know his life more than the president knows his own life, as far as what his day-to-day agenda is going to be, who he's meeting with day-to-day. The chief of staff is probably one of the most stressful jobs in the entire country next to the presidency, right? Because you have to know more about the president than the president himself. All right, so not only the main advisor, the chief of staff, but you're going to have all these other advisors. So I put these titles over here that are all going to be part of the executive branch, from budgeting to security, national security, to drug control. You got an economic advisor, someone that's going to help you with science and technology policy, and then environmental policies. So these are all the areas that are currently part of the executive office of the president under President Trump. Now, different presidents might have different titles or even change or add offices to have more advisors, but that's up to the president, okay? The key point here is these advisors do not, all right, this is something you want to star, do not need to be approved by the Senate, all right? All those other positions that the president's going to appoint, Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Education, Supreme Court judges, those are all going to be people that need to be approved by the Senate of the United States. These advisors do not need to be approved. These need to be people the president can trust, because he's going to be talking to them on a day-to-day basis. All right, and then the last group here is the cabinet, or second to last group is the cabinet. The cabinet is what's going to be our 15 executive departments. It's going to be our Department of Education. It's going to be a Department of Defense, the Secretary of State, all right, so which we call the State Department. These are going to be the people that do need to be approved by the Senate. So when the president becomes president, he gets to pick who these people are going to be. Once he chooses who the Department of Education's secretary, or who's in charge, the leader of the Department of Education is going to be, that person goes before the Senate. The Senate, it's almost like they're on trial. They're going to dig up information on that person as far back as they can. Same thing if the president chooses Supreme Court justice. They're going to go dig up as much information on that person as they can, and the Senate's going to decide whether or not that person's qualified for that job. All right, so you see the picture here. These are all the secretaries from all the departments sitting around the table in somewhere in the White House, in the West Wing they call it, where they're going to have the department secretaries advising the president on different topics. They do create, enforce, and supervise laws. So they're going to be the ones that will ultimately be kind of directing and meeting with Congress, Senate, and House of Representatives to help them come up with ideas for bills that could become laws, give them information on how that bill or law would work if it was passed. So that is a big part of the executive departments, trying to guide the country in that direction as well. Then the final group of the executive department are what we call these independent agencies. This is a little confusing. They're part of the executive branch. The president can pick who the leaders of these agencies are, but at that point, they operate on their own, just like the title. They're independent from the executive branch after that point. Funding and stuff will come through those different advisors that we talked about, part of the executive branch. They'll advise the president on how much the NASA needs, how much CIA needs, based on the leaders of those agencies telling them as well. All right, so these are some of the examples here. You got the CIA, Central Intelligence Agency, which are going to be kind of the spies on other countries and what they're doing. NASA is obviously our groups that go into outer space, and space technology, space and research. You got the United States Postal Service, which is where our mail comes from. You got the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, which is obviously going to deal with the environment. And then the FCC is the one that you guys as teenagers will probably deal with the most, which you don't even realize, but that's a Federal Communications Commission. So they're going to decide, the grades on or ratings for movies, for music. You guys don't buy CDs anymore, but they'll rate, CDs, parental guidance or whatever they put on the labels now. When you turn on a TV show and you see the rating, TVMA or TV PG, that's coming from the FCC. They determine what words can or can't be used on TV, before a certain time at night and after a certain time at night. Okay, so those are our executive branch. The last thing I'll hit here before I'll show you the assignment that goes with this is presidential succession. So presidential succession comes out of the 25th Amendment. It's based on the idea that, we have to know who would be the next in line to be president if something did happen to the president. So most of us know that after the president, our first in line is the vice president. And then after that, you got the Speaker of the House. This person who's in charge of the Senate, his or her official title is President Pro Tempore of the Senate. And then you have all the departments here, the secretaries or the leaders of each of the departments that would be next in line to be president. All right, so this is the order of the presidency. There's a really cool show called Designated Survivor. My son and I are just finished watching season 1 of it, and it's based on this concept of presidential succession. It's not based on a true story, but a real concept. So this is what they do when the president is giving a speech to Congress. All the members of Congress are going to be there. All the secretaries will be there from each of the departments. So they pick one person that's not going to go to that speech just in case something bad happens there and they happen to all die or get killed. They have what they call the designated survivor every time that the State of the Union takes place. And that's what the TV show was based on. This guy was a designated survivor. He was part of the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So he was the secretary of that. So he's pretty far down the list, but he was the designated survivor. So when all these people above him got killed, he became the president just by line of the presidential succession. So it's a pretty cool show. If you get a chance, probably binge watch it pretty quick because it's like 20-something episodes, but it was pretty good. All right, that will be our next topic we'll cover, the presidential roles. So what I want you guys to do is go ahead to the worksheet on Google Classroom called the Executive Departments. And what you're going to do is you're going to use the link to the website here called the Executive Branch's website. And when you scroll down a little ways, you'll go through the stuff we just covered, the president, the vice president, and eventually get to the cabinet. Once you get to the cabinet, you're going to just read through each of the departments: Department of Agriculture, Department of Commerce, and then on your worksheet, go ahead and just summarize what does that department do. So what does the Department of Agriculture do? What does the Department of Commerce cover? Department of Defense. Just give me a couple sentences on each one. Read through that paragraph, kind of summarize it in your own words. Okay? And then once you have that assignment done, go ahead and submit it. All right. You got anything else you want to add, Mrs. Washington?
Yes.
What would you like to add?
Happy Easter.
All right. You're my daughter, Cam, aren't you?
Yep.
Nice job.
That's funny.